Alice is brought to you in part by Sushi Market Sprouts on 7th in Santa Cruz and Kaito in the Capitola Mall Food Court. Treat yourself to the finest Japanese cuisine you'll find anywhere with fresh sushi to go and delicious ramen dinners. Sushi Market Sprouts and Kaito. Yum! Welcome to China Über Alice for this Thursday. We have quite a show for you. There is a lot going on involving China around the world, and we'll get to it in just a couple of minutes. I'm Bill Graff, and my guest today, as always, Nan Su, who is a senior reporter for the Epoch Times newspaper and publishing group, and Amy Howe, who is a first-hand participant in the re-education camps under Chairman Mao in the Cultural Revolution of mainland China. Boy, what a day in the world of news. First of all, if you've just looked at the weather today in China, a huge flooding, just unbelievable amounts of water in one of the major districts in one of the major regions in China, and it is causing over 1 million people to be displaced. Think about that for just a minute. If there was any place in the United States where, or Canada, or any of your favorite places on the planet Earth, if over 1 million people were told they better get to some high ground somewhere because water's coming.
Yeah, same region, same province, 1975, it's about 240,000 people die in the flood.
Wow. Good afternoon, Amy.
Good afternoon.
And Nan, good afternoon to you, sir. Obviously, we're going to have some guests. We'll be talking with a rather familiar face in our second hour, a familiar voice on KSCO's two radio stations, KSCO and KOMY. Dr. Joel Wallach is married to a Chinese woman, and he knows a lot about that region, a lot about China in general. We'll be checking in with Dr. Wallach in our second hour today to talk about the flooding in China. And we'll be talking about the Falun Gong in a few minutes. But first, of course, we have a lot of things to do, and not the least of which is Amy's story. We'll get to Amy's story for today in just a moment. Nan, you've been following a lot this week.
Yes. Well, first of all, we're going to have a special guest in the first hour who is a return guest, Levi Browde. He's the CEO of Falun Gong Information Center. The reason we have him today is because 2 days ago, July 20th, was the 22nd anniversary of persecution of Falun Gong. So we're going to have him to come back to talk to our audience about the persecution of Falun Gong as well as the religious freedom related issues in China. In the second hour, we're going to have Dr. Wallach. Now, I'm not sure if you know, the Chinese Communist Party, since it took over control of China in 1949, it has built 98,000 water dams.
Say 98,000?
98,000.
After 1949.
Yeah, that's
about 60-some years.
73 years. Yeah. 73 years. It's more than 1,000 dams a year.
Yeah.
And out of the 98,000 water dams, more than 20,000 of them are more than 15 meters in height, which means it's like about 50 feet in height. It's like 5-story. Okay, 20,000, more than 20,000 of them was like more than 5-story in height. So, what would those dams do to the earth? Now, Dr. Wallach has a long research done, and he had a very interesting findings. And if his findings are true, then that will put China at just another reason to put China as the main cause of the global warming and climate change. So we're going to have Dr. Wallach talk to us in the second hour. But, of course, before that, we're going to first have Amy Howe to talk about her personal experience of when she stayed in the labor camp for more than a decade of time during the Cultural Revolution under Chairman Mao. So, Amy, what are you going to bring us today?
Yes. Last Father's Day, I just say that refresh everybody's memory. I will reconnect with my some friend, all the childhood friend and neighbors. So I talked about the one story last week. The girl, the mother had to send her to get her father's ash because they don't allow an adult to be there. You had to denounce, do all kind of things. So there's so many kids was waiting there for their parents' ash. So I talking about the second story. It's very sad. It's a girl, and I went to the labor camp with her, and I know she told me her father was died. She was probably 4 years old, and she just they tried to get his ash, never got it. So the story is her father will work for the Chinese propaganda department. They have some kind of newspaper. She's a writer, reporter, and so very intellectual person, and write very well. And so he was promoted to the head of the department. So 1957, that the movement coming the rightist. So they encourage people to make a suggestion and to not criticize, just suggestion to Communist Party. And the movement called it like 100 birds singing. That means they want to have different voice. Thousands flowers blooming. That kind of, so just encourage everybody to talk about, to just express different opinions. So all the people, intellectual people, they started writing the suggestions, maybe some criticizing, Basically, Mao told them, it's set up, told them, say that now is the time when Communist Party is not just one party, one voice. We welcome all kind of voice. So those people, mostly.
Wrong.
Yeah.
Just warning folks, pay attention from this point on.
Yeah. And then they wrote, and then the Mao said, we had to stop this. He said that finally those people show their true color. So the movement basically is a way to set a bait to lay those snakes out. The poison snakes out. So those people become a poison snake. So they arrested those people and sent them to a different labor camp.
Now, it was interesting. I read some of the stories. Some of the leaders in some of the areas, they will actually go to the intelligent people, the educated people, and ask them personally. Ask them, say, hey, please. Make some criticism of me or criticism of the government, or give us your suggestions, right? But then afterwards, all these people were labeled
disappeared.
Rightists become the victims of anti-rightist movement.
Yeah.
And also it was interesting. The movement actually, they gave quotas. To every unit.
Yeah.
So you have to
every work unit, you have to have a certain amount of people.
Certain number of people. This as a minimum quota that have to be the rightist. So they will become the victims. No, we have some. It's not a joke. A lot of people think it's a joke. It's a real story. So in some of the units, there were a couple hundred people, right? So they have the minimum is they have to come up with one rightist.
Yeah.
So everyone sit down days of meetings. No one want to be that guy. And then
they point out each other.
Nobody want to. It just happened. One guy he want to go to restroom. He went to restroom for like 5 minutes. He came back. There you go. He was the rightist.
Yeah, it's not a joke. It's not a really joke because I know the couple.
Wow.
So the wife was becoming one because she went to the bathroom.
Wow.
Because they had to determine one. That's 1%. So 100%, 100 people have to have one.
Oh, wow.
And not back.
That's how bad it was.
Yeah. Back to my story. This girl, the father, and so he is a young man, and so not even 30 years old, and have cool kids, and they live in that. She showed it to me the picture that time. Before the father arrested, they live in very nice apartment buildings, in the center of the Shanghai. The custom house, they used to be Shanghai custom. That the building, bigger buildings, and then after that, immediately kicked that out to one room, a really horrible place. And then they did never tell them where they sent him. And so about 8 months later, and her mother received a letter said that he's dead. So mother was devastating, just want to know. He said, I wanted to get his body. And they said, no, you cannot come in to see the body. They don't even tell where he is. And so she looked at the last letter, the communications, the correspondence, and he was describing that place is like a bamboo forest. So it has to be somewhere have lots of bamboo. But China has so many places have lots of bamboo. You don't know which mountains. But the letter was carried by the person. There's a word there. And not the mail. Because you mail, you probably will know the address or where the shop, right? And so the person, so she decided to looking for that person deliver the mail. And can't find that person anymore. Just no way. And then they mail something to her. It's like half used toothpaste and toothbrush, and some not even his wallet, and then probably something with family pictures. Mm-hmm. So just put the little package. Just that's it. So that becoming my friend always is a big empathy place in her heart because she grew up with. So for long time. So at one point they have 4 siblings, and the mother just cannot afford. So one point and wanted to give her away, and she just crying, and then even the teacher said, they said, don't give her away. She's so smart. She's a smart little girl. Maybe if you don't want her, I'm gonna take her. So that's why mother decided not to, finally. And then eventually, for many years later, and China had the reform, and the 4 kids all grow up, and actually she has one sister, older sister, and 2 brothers. And 2 brothers all becoming have their own business, own some construction material business, doing very well. So they decided, they get together with the mother, decided to give father a burial. So they bought a place, and but there's nothing. So it's empty. Basically, maybe the clothes her mother keep, just put it in there. That was it. But she decided that moment. She said that, now in the information, people have internet. Maybe I should searching. So she spent about 5 years searching what place her father died. She thought that maybe at least I can find out. Then get there and to maybe something else, So about 5 years she started searching. So one year, I think 2005, I met her in China. She told me she's gonna go to that province called Jiangxi province with lots of the bamboo forest. Yeah, a lot. So she determined is that place. Also, she contacted with the county, say that did they ever have the labor camp or any people from outside not the same locals, and were there forced labor. And so some young guy working for the county, and through the internet, so the online, and he said that he did a search. He found that one place probably used to be a labor camp. So she said, wow, she immediately just rushed there. She think that there may be somebody, can talk to locals. You just don't believe somebody just disappeared without the trace, just that's gone, right? So somebody have to know, somebody with him or saw him or whatever, the relationship. At least he can find somebody, know somebody, whatever, right? So she decided, she took about 3 months off. She's still working now. She's a doctor. She took 3 months off and then got there, started searching. And she was expected to have some result. But she talked to everybody, and important thing is the guy will show the map, the young guy working there, show the map, said that sign may be as. But she got there, she wanted to look at the sign, and then that guy, the young guy, is not working there anymore. And then she found this county, the head of this county and the department, and they said that never happened. There's no labor camp. Nothing. And she insists want to go there. I said, well, you can go, but there's nothing there. And so she still want to go because she take 3 months off. She wanted to find out, right? So she got there and talked to all the people, but some people, some old ladies, and wanted to tell her something, but kind of scared. And then she think maybe give them some money or something, they will provide some information, or somebody was with her father, maybe can trace down that person still there, right? So the old woman said that he know the guy but don't know the name, and so she give her some money, and so she pointed out, the only point, said that guy used to live in that village, and you go there, maybe he still have a family there, So she got there, and it's so difficult, and they have some people there, and they say that maybe you would know, but you had to give her some money. So she gave it that probably 4 or 5 people were there, right? They say they all know, but she gave them 100 yuan each. And still...
No word.
No words. Afterward, just nothing, So she comes back, because she told me she's going to go there. I was very interested. I said, you're going to tell me, I hope a successful trip. At least you can find some information. I was very disappointed.
Wow.
Nothing. Just nothing. And then she told me her schoolmate in the same situation and actually found her father, but is a big disappointment, because the communist CCP make her father become an absolutely different person, and that girl's father also is an intellectual, some writer or something, and then become a farmer, is working then remarried to the local girl, and because the woman was saved his life, and so the girl got there and expected some kind of reunion, the happiness, the joy, something, because she found a photo book, and when every picture, the father took all the pictures, also detailed, say 1 month old, 2 months old, and the first 2 cells, kind of things, make her very sentiment. She think her father still love her, long lost daughter, so that reunion will be tremendous. And actually, father told her, said that, I wish you not found me. Just like that. You go home. So she told her friend, he said that, maybe
it's better
not to. No. So that's the story.
Wow. Amazing how a government and a regime can change people's lives like that.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It's totally amazing.
Well, that's just the history of a communist regime, and so far the regime has never make apology for what they have done to all these people. They never admit they did anything wrong for the anti-rightist movement. And also they have not...
I think now is much worse, because that time I don't heard anything harvest people's organs.
Well, you know what? It occurs to me that it occurs to me that it's worse because all the people who might have some knowledge are now old, and they're going away as time goes on.
Yeah, so nobody will know. But when they did it to Falun Gong, harvest the organ, everything, much worse. That time they didn't think about that yet.
Yeah, they didn't. Well, Levi Browde is our guest, and he is on the KSCO telephone now. You want to introduce him for us?
Levi Browde is a CEO of Falun Gong Information Center in New York. He's our return guest. He was with us back in April, and now, like I mentioned earlier, in the beginning of today's program, July 20th marked the 22nd anniversary of the persecution of Falun Gong. It started in 1999. At that time, China had about 100 million people practicing Falun Gong, and it was ever since July 20th of 1999, and all the people practicing this meditation, spiritual exercise has been under persecution. So, Levi, welcome to our program.
Thank you very much for having me back.
I understood that in the past couple of weeks, all around the world, there was a lot of protest in all different countries because Falun Gong now is practiced by people living in more than 100 nations. So all around the world, there's a lot of protest going on. And can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. A couple days ago marked July 20th, and July 20th is the anniversary when the persecution began. It was 22 years ago on July 20th that all around China, in the cover of night, people were pulled from their beds in the middle of the night and taken to detention centers, and it started the nationwide persecution of, the 100 million people that were practicing Falun Gong there at the time, and that's been raging for the last 22 years.
Yeah, I thought there was a lot of activities going on, like a protest in front of Chinese consulate. I know that Sunday night they have some candle vigil night candle vigil night in front of San Francisco Chinese consulate by local Falun Gong practitioners. And I also heard that there was a lot of activities going on in Washington, D.C. And do you have some of the information about those activities?
Yeah, a lot of the activities were centered in Washington, D.C. We had a whole day there that started with a rally where we had a lot of national and international NGOs come out to speak, everywhere from Freedom House, groups like that, some of the government agencies. So we had a rally right there on the mall. And then after that, there was a march through Washington, and that culminated in the candlelight vigil just along sort of I think it's the north side of the Washington Monument. So that was a day-long event. That was sort of the largest event, but as you mentioned, Falun Gong was practiced in many cities around the world, and so you had smaller events in San Francisco and Paris and London and all these different places where there are Falun Gong community wanting to commemorate this sort of sad and tragic day.
Levi, is there any indication to you, to your group, or to people who are fighting this persecution around the world, that any of these demonstrations are even paid attention to by China? Is this more of an effort to publicize the fact that it's happening rather than trying to change the Chinese government's ways?
I think it does change it, and I think there's two things that happen. One is, anytime something happens in the West, there is a network run by Falun Gong practitioners that is literally millions strong throughout China. That normally what they do is it's sort of like an underground news source where they, in their back rooms, they have printers and they print out leaflets and they distribute them to towns and villages around China in an effort to counter the persecution. Well, and counter sort of the state-run narrative to sort of let people understand what's really going on in our country. But over that same network, news from the West travels as well. I mean, obviously, the state-run media in China is not going to cover it. But if we hold a huge rally in D.C., pretty soon you'd be surprised. People in even small towns and villages in China see pictures and get news that that's happening. That brings all kinds of impact in China. It gives hope to a lot of people. It also sort of stays the hand of would-be persecutors because they kind of see that this is an issue that's getting more attention. And if you're somebody who's like working at a labor camp or a prison or a black jail and you're involved, in torturing somebody, that really gives you pause. So that's one thing that happens. The second thing that happens is these events become a rallying cry for major government forces. So, for example, the State Department issued a statement on July 20th. The Foreign Relations Committee of the U.S. Congress issued a statement. Those statements make their way into China. And so, again, coming to those people who are actually doing the persecuting inside China, when they start reading that the State Department is saying stop it and the U.S. Congress is saying stop it, and combined with the sanctions that their State Department has been doing over these last 2 years, it does strike real fear into a lot of the police apparatus, and that has real impact on restraining them.
Hi, Levi. Do you have any information for the CCP how they track down the Falun Gong people inside China or outside China?
Well, it's inside China. It's largely done in two ways: technology and human intelligence. And on the technology front, as you guys probably all very well aware, for the last 15 years, the CCP has built up the Great Firewall of China, which started as just really a firewall to block people inside China from reaching, free information. But it has developed into way beyond that, in which case they have anywhere from monitoring all the WeChat messages or Weibo messages to doing facial recognition. And we've had people actually picked up and arrested because of these technology and surveillance ability and put into prison. We even had a woman, just recently actually in Tongcheng City in Hebei province. She wasn't even a practitioner. Her husband was. And he was picked up and thrown to jail. She knew that was a grave injustice, so she took to Weibo and WeChat, and she started making a big fuss out of it. They grabbed her. They put her in prison for 4 years. She eventually died.
Wow.
So this is...
Is it inside China?
Front. That's inside China. That was in Tongcheng City in Hebei province.
Wow.
So there's that, and then, of course, there's the old-school human intelligence where they simply grab Falun Gong practitioners and torture them until they give up the names of other Falun Gong practitioners in their area, and that, unfortunately, has been going on for the last 22 years.
Now, Levi, let me ask you this. It's been going on for 22 years. Do you have the information that how many people actually being arrested and how many people die in China?
Very, very difficult. It's very difficult. Here's what we do know. I had mentioned this network, right, which these days is millions strong, and it has been that big for many, many years. So this is coordinated by an overseas website called minhui.org. So every single day, they're getting between a dozen and several scores of reports of people being imprisoned, harassed, extorted, tortured, sentenced. And so they're getting that every day, and they have been for the last 22 years. The problem is it is most definitely the tip of the iceberg. So any numbers that we have there is just the ones we know about, because it's so dangerous, as I mentioned about this woman from Changchun City. It's so dangerous just to get online and report this stuff out of China. It's just the tip of the iceberg. So I'll give you an example of how small how different the numbers could be. So Minghui goes through a pretty thorough process when they hear about a practitioner who's been tortured to death, for example. They'll record that, they'll verify it in various ways. So over the last 22 years, they've only recorded about 4,500 people who've been tortured to death. A huge number, but if you talk to some of the third-party investigators like the journalist Ethan Gutman or the investigator and lawyer David Mattis, who's been looking into organ harvesting, they'll tell us that by their estimations, just looking at the number of organ harvesting transplants that are going on and the fact that Falun Gong up until recently has really been the only source, it's likely 60,000 or many more people are being killed for the organs every single year.
Wow.
And they're just looking at it from a forced organ harvesting. So that's their estimate, but it's so difficult because obviously, China's a closed system. They're not going to just open up their doors and let you kind of walk in and sort of talk to people and count this stuff. But I will say, for every single day for the last 20 years, across every single province in China, Minghui has received reports of imprisonment, detention, sentencing, torture, and killing. We do know that.
Levi, let me ask you this. In a country of over 1 billion people, how many people do you estimate practice Falun Gong?
Well, we have a couple data points on that. We know for sure that when the persecution first started in 1999, there was a government survey that came back and said that there was at least 70 million people practicing. Later that year, Shanghai TV, which again is state-run media, said that there were over 100 million. And, state-run media is not going to say something unless that came from somewhere. So that was their estimates back when they didn't have an incentive to change the numbers or make them smaller. It's interesting to note that after they started the persecution, they dropped that number to 3 million to try and make it sound like the Falun Gong group was very small, without any sort of explanation. So that's 70 to 100 million. That's one data point we have. The other data point we have is about, I think it was like 4 years ago, Minghui did an audit of all the people around China who were downloading leaflets in order to print them out and distribute them around China. And they had a way of kind of analyzing unique IP addresses and how many people are working in each of these sort of, living room print centers, we'll call them. And they estimated it was about, they said at least 20 million people were active. So that's not included anybody who's just quietly practicing at home or anything like that. That's 20 million people are active. So those are the two data points we have. Anecdotally, we know that flow of information coming from China every day has not decreased, it's increased, and there's a lot of stories of people, a practitioner will be put into a prison and trying to conduct themselves according to their principles of truthfulness, compassion, and forbearance. It's not uncommon for a lot of the criminals that they're incarcerated with, who have kind of lost hope on life, see that this person is trying to act very morally and sort of shows them some of the practice, and they start all practicing in the jail cell. So those stories are very, very common. That's all we can really sort of say in terms of what the numbers would look like.
Well, in hearing your number range, depending on which side of it you believe, it's roughly twice the population of the entire state of California. That's a lot of people.
But say over 100 million, they stated.
Well,
actually,
so
probably much more than that.
Well, the other end of the figure was like 30 million. So if you take his low estimate of the people who are actually practicing, California has like 35 million people. So it's from Levi's low figure to Levi's high figure is somewhere twice as many people as the state of California. That's a lot of people.
So Levi, do you have any information people from outside China, they went back to China, they are Falun Gong practicing, but are they being monitoring, arrested recently? Any case?
Do you mean people who are here in the U.S. and went back to China?
Yeah. Other country.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's something that people avoid, quite frankly, just because of that problem.
I would avoid it.
Yeah. So I'm talking about if they enter the China, they had to answer the question like you are practicing Falun Gong or you are the member of the Falun Gong or something, have those kind of forms to fill out when you apply for the visa?
There have been several. What I know of are normally if you're going to try and go back to China, they'll just deny it. They don't want you back in the country.
Oh.
But those that do, it tends to be much more sinister, where they won't sort of formally ask you about, sit you down and tell you fill out a form. They'll let you go back. They'll watch you for a couple days, and then they'll bring you in for a quote-unquote chat. And they start to work on you.
They have a tea, I think they call, have a coffee or tea.
Yes, exactly. And I think what's
that means secret service to interrogating you. Yeah, have a coffee. That's
right. And I think what's scary on those instances is that what the Chinese officials will disclose is they know everything about that person back in the U.S.
Wow.
They know where they work. They know how much money they make. They know who they talk to. They know where they live. And that really kind of freaks people out.
Well, sure, it rattles them because now that they realize the government of China now knows all about them.
Yeah.
Now, Levi, what about the investigation of the forced organ harvesting? It's been going on ever since 2006. Now, did you guys have any new information? What's the latest that the Chinese government say about the forced organ harvesting?
Well, they haven't said a lot that's of substance. I mean, I think the biggest thing in recent years to point to is the China Tribunal. And this was an independent tribunal set up by the lead prosecutor against Slobodan Milosevic, who was the war criminal from the former Yugoslavia. Mm-hmm. So the same guy that prosecuted him, he was the one who spearheaded a tribunal of lawyers, journalists, and other China experts in London about 2 years ago. And they went through an exhaustive process, months and months and months. They called witnesses from across 3 continents. And their determination was sort of the biggest news that's happened in the last 5 years, where they said, essentially their final judgment was, not only is this happening, not only is it happening on a wide scale, Falun Gong is a primary source, and it continues to happen today. So when that came out, that broke a little bit of what had been a media silence. We had, anywhere from half a dozen to around 10 major papers, the BBC, Sunday Times, all kinds of papers that were sort of covering that story. That was kind of the biggest news. And that's also sort of the latest, is that there is no indication this is necessarily slowed down. They've just taken steps to kind of go a little bit under the radar now that there's so much scrutiny from the international community. What has been good in terms of a development is countries stepping up, and the U.S. might be the latest one with a new bill that's in Congress right now, and that is binding sort of legal measures that curtail or prevent people in other countries from traveling to China and getting an organ that is likely sourced from someone who was murdered.
Levi, we're joined by one of our regular contributors, Michael Olson, who has a question for you today.
Yes, thank you, Levi. Earlier in the show, Amy Howe was talking about the 100 Flowers campaign of Chairman Mao, in which she encouraged everybody to speak out against the regime, and once they did, they were chopped down in the anti-rightist campaign. Now, throughout the Chinese Communist Party's history, we've seen these pogroms for eliminating those that the regime feels is a threat. And I'm looking at the Falun Gong, and I'm wondering why the Chinese Communist Party thinks it's a threat. What are they afraid of?
Excellent question. And I think going back to those campaigns, the anti-right campaign and all those, I think there was really 2 sides always. One was to look at a group that they thought was a threat and actually target it. For sure that was going on. But there was a second reason for all these campaigns, and that is to terrify everyone else. so that they came to understand that when the CCP goes after a group, you better distance yourself from them quick, you better get away from them, otherwise you're next. And that's why the campaigns, they were continuous, right? First they went after the landlords and the capitalists and the intellectuals. They sort of group by group by group, and kind of every 10 years they would go after a new group.
Yes, that's right. Every 10 years.
Yeah.
So it was whether you need it or not, you take the laundry out.
Yeah. So what happened with Falun Gong is kind of a perfect storm of a couple things. You had Jiang Zemin, who was the head of the CCP at that time, and keep in mind he was the first leader that did not go through the revolution. He had no sort of credibility or street cred, if you were, with his peers. He really, he was really on sort of shaky ground. He came to power, of course, in the wake of 1989 because he stood on the side of the regime and crushing the students. And so he came to power that, but he was really sort of shaky, and he was desperate to build up a legacy. He was desperate to do what Mao had done and Deng Xiaoping and everybody, build up a cult of personality around himself. And right as he's getting ready to do that, we're coming back to like 1992, right? Mm-hmm. Right as he's ready to do that, along comes Falun Gong. Here is this spiritual practice that is more Chinese than anything else that was in China at that time in terms of being authentically Chinese. It's from Chinese culture. It comes out of Buddhism and Taoism and these traditions. And it swept the country, and suddenly there's 100 million people practicing. Everybody's talking about it, and nobody's talking about Jiang Zemin. Mm-hmm. As petty as this sounds, the people who looked into this, one in particular, Willie Lamb, who was a senior analyst for CNN at the time, he was the first one who got senior officials on record to admit this was very personal for Jiang. He wanted to go after Falun Gong because it was essentially stealing his thunder. It was a threat to him personally. But coming back to your question, which is very good, there was that second aspect. It wasn't just a threat to Jiang Zemin personally. This was the next campaign. 10 years later, this was a group that he thought was weak. They were passive. They were peaceful. We could target them, demonize them, build up a whole campaign, and in that process, scare everybody else. Because it's been 10 years, 12 years since they've been scared. And this is the next wave. This was the next campaign. Those were the two real reasons, and they're exact same reasons for the previous campaigns that Jiang Zemin and the CCP targeted Falun Gong.
So, Levi, I heard about that, I left China in 1982, so Falun Gong is afterwards, but some of my friends, they've been through that thing, Falun. So they told me something about the background inside the information. He said, you're right, Jiang Zemin wants to establish his power, especially military, because he did never be military, doesn't have a, so he forced lots of people, military officers, early retirement, so that way he can put his own people in the military to control the country. And so those Falun Gong people, lots of it is retired peoples. So that's why they get together and they can call people in the Tiananmen Square like 2-3 hours, million people showed up at this Falun Gong. So he was so scared. But he would think he want to be smarter than Deng Xiaoping, because Deng Xiaoping led them in the Tiananmen Square for a couple of weeks or something. He said never let those people, that things happen. So he had to make them disappear. So use those neighborhood committee and to report each other and send the people away, disappeared. Is that true? That you know more information than I do, because I left the China at that time already.
Well, I think Falun Gong, started when it first started because of it was, one of the big things that really took off was the health benefits. People were just getting healthy,
exercise.
Ailments fall away. Yeah, it was exercise, but it was particularly effective in sort of making people healthy, and especially really chronic stuff. And so, yes, among the older population, it kind of took off quickly, right out of the gate. But very quickly, actually, because of its sort of it's rooted in traditional Chinese culture and its elements of Buddhism and things like that, it also quickly took off among the intellectuals. And so it was in the universities, the professors, and the students. So very quickly, it was a very mixed group. Mm-hmm. The one thing I have heard about the military, I have heard this exact same thing you mentioned, and it was interesting that there was at one point, I don't remember which year, but there was at one point where Jiang Zemin elevated to general more generals than any other leader had done in their entire careers, and he did it all in 1 year. And the criteria was who's loyal to him in crushing Falun Gong and who's not. Those who were elevated. Those who were not were kicked out. So I do think there is a military concern in Jiang Zemin's mind, at least from what I've heard. And I think you're right on that point.
Yes, one quick follow-up on Jiang Zemin. He is no longer, I think, actively persecuting Falun Gong, but I have seen him and his family listed as the leadership of the Chinese biotech industry and research.
Yeah, I mean, Chinese politics is like an enigma wrapped in a mystery. I mean, a lot of this, when Deng Xiaoping...
I'm glad you said that, because that's my biggest issue in hosting this program, is trying to figure out where the government's going.
Yeah.
I'm glad you said that, Levi, because I've wondered that myself.
It's tough. I mean, one pattern we do see is that when someone formally steps down, they tend to retain a power center, and they can operate in a very powerful manner for a long time. We certainly saw that with Deng Xiaoping. You see that with Jiang Zemin. His faction that he built and put in place is still very active in many areas. And so it's always very tough. You'll see in the news that there's an anti-corruption campaign and this official is going after that one. Behind the scenes, what's really going on, usually it's that factional stuff. And Jiang Zemin does retain a certain power base and a certain set of factions that continue to contend with the current leadership and continue to drive, to some extent, the persecution. So we know that, at least, but any given event, it's a little bit hard to say who's behind what. To the latter part of your point, yes, this is a known phenomenon that's been happening for decades, is that the family members, especially the children of high-ranking CCP officials, are some of the most wealthy people on the planet. It's really highly, highly corrupt.
Levi, the persecution of Falun Gong, in my mind, it really reflect religious freedom situation in China. Not Falun Gong, but underground Christian church, Uyghurs group, Tibetans. They are all persecuting. I think a main part of the reason for the CCP to persecute them is, to control the people's religious freedom. Now, what do you think that from that aspect, religious freedom, that aspect, what do you think that in the near future the regime is going?
It's a difficult thing to answer, is sort of predict the future. I mean, there's patterns that I could point to that might help allude to an answer. And one is, I mentioned there is this very large network, million strong in China, that has been working diligently day in and day out to get people information that the state-run media is not going to tell them. And that there have been many, many little pockets around China where that's actually had a profound effect. I mean, we've cases where, the chief CCP guy in a village who's actually the leader of abducting and even torturing some people in some cases, kind of having a change of heart and coming around, and he's sort of now he's kind of the protector that when the CCP people come from the bigger region to inspect his work, he kind of tells the Falun Gong people, okay, go hide, they're coming, and stuff like that. So you have these stories, and you get these kind of stories throughout China. So we know for a fact from these stories that hearts and minds are changing.
Well, that's good news.
Yeah, it is very good news. And I think if you combine
unless they get transplanted, the hearts, I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's true. If you combine that phenomenon with the phenomenon I mentioned earlier, that when, for example, our U.S. State Department sanctions a Chinese official and news of that goes around China, and suddenly the police chiefs in all these areas are scared that they're next.
Yeah.
Both of those phenomena are pointing to a broader trend where more and more people in the rank and file of the security apparatus do not want to do persecution anymore.
Right.
And I got to believe at some point that's got to tip to a point where it has to end because there's no one left to do it.
Well, on that positive note, Levi, we are out of time for this hour. We want to thank you so much for coming back on and talking to you about this, particularly on this anniversary.
Thank you, Levi.
Okay, thank you for having me.
All right, we'll take our first break of the program, our first hour, and we'll be right back on China Uber Alice in just a moment. Satisfy your hunger right now with the delicious ramen and sushi you'll find waiting for you at Kaito. Easy in and out location in the Capitola Mall food court. Special orders welcome. Fresh, delicious, and oh so good.
This is Koji. I'm looking forward to seeing you at my restaurant, Kaito.
Santa Cruz Shakespeare returns to live outdoor performances this summer in the Audrey Stanley Grove. Summer productions include R2 by Jessica Kobzanski, an adaptation of Shakespeare's Richard II, and The Agitators by Matt Smart, the story of Frederick Douglass and Susan B. Anthony and their respective fights for racial justice and gender equality. Purchase tickets for live performances or the stream at home option at santacruzshakespeare.org. That's santacruzshakespeare.org. See you in the Grove.
Chef Ben here from the Back Nine Grill and Bar at the Pasatiempo exit, where we serve the very best house-ground burgers in Santa Cruz County and possibly the world. Come in Thursday for the Outlaw Burger and a pint for only $15. See you at the 9.
California coast to the fertile valleys inland. Earthwise Land Service is your land's best friend. Earthwise can clear it, mulch it, move it, sculpt it, grade it, drain it, or retain it, any way you choose. Earthwise Land Service is your land's best friend.
Hi, I'm Todd Westfall, born and raised and grew up in Watsonville all my life. Currently principal of Calabasas Elementary School. My family bought 11 acres of land and an old home to fix up. The land needed some fixing up too. It was all overgrown under poison oak, and we were only able to access a small piece of it. Me and my 3 boys went to work on it with machetes and pole saws, and only made about 10 feet progress in a whole day. Heard about Buck at Earthwise, called them up, came out, took one look, ended up clearing pretty much all the land, so now we have full use of all of our property.
Earthwise Land Service is your land's best friend.
Samaya's Eco Flooring and Design Center has moved. Our new home is 3155 Porter Street in Soquel. Same great service and quality flooring with a wide variety of flooring choices. Open Monday through Saturday, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. or by appointment. We offer free quotes and a discount if you mention this ad. Samaya's Eco Flooring and Design Center, 831-466-9719. That's 831-466-9719 or ecowoodfloor.com.
KSCO has some of the most intelligent listeners on the planet, and most intelligent minds want to know, what are my options for taking Social Security benefits? Do I need an estate plan? When, where, and how do I enroll in Medicare? If you want answers to these and other hot financial topics, listen to Money Moves. Host Pamela Fugit-Hedrick and her guests have tips and tools you'll need so you can manage your money effectively. That's Money Moves, 7 p.m. Thursdays here on KSCO.
And that's our first hour of China Uber Alice for today. It's 3 o'clock at KSCO Center.
Good afternoon. I'm Susan Simon with your King of the Hill traffic and weather update. The traffic on Highway 17 is slow moving as it gets toward the intersection with Highway 1, as is Highway 1 between Santa Cruz and Aptos. There's about a 10-minute delay in both directions through that area. Southbound Highway 1 is also very slow near Moss Landing. And there are some slow pockets of traffic on Highways 9, 129, 152, and 68. The traffic on southbound Highway 101 south of Gilroy is very slow. And on local roads, Gilroy Hot Springs Road is closed right now where crews are working to bring a vehicle out of a ravine east of Palisade Ridge. Small craft advisory is in effect from now through this evening. And the time now, 6 minutes after 3 p.m., and that means it's time for the second hour of the China Uber Alice Show with Amy Howe, Nan Su, and Bill Graff.
China Uber Alice is brought to you in part by Sushi Market Sprouts on 7th in Santa Cruz and Kaito in the Capitola Mall Food Court. Treat yourself to the finest Japanese cuisine you'll find anywhere with fresh sushi to go and delicious ramen dinners. Sushi Market Sprouts and Kaito. Yum! It's time for hour number 2 of China Uber Alice here on AM 1080 KSCO. Boy, you bring up a subject on anything involving the virus or controversy in any place, and boy, you get we were talking about it during the news break, and you get 6 different opinions from 6 different people in the same room. Which I guess is what talk radio is all about.
But only I was right.
Yeah, you're never right.
Yes, never wrong.
I don't know why we let him in here.
CCP.
Just kidding. Listen, we're here again. I'm Bill Graff, Nan Su, Amy Howe, and, of course, Michael Olson. And in a few minutes, when we get the good doctor on the telephone, we'll be talking with a very familiar voice to this radio station and to our sister station, KOMY, Dr. Joel Wallach, who is both a doctor and a veterinarian, and he is very familiar with China. His wife is Chinese. He has been to China
many times.
Several times.
Yeah. No, lots of times.
And he has been following climate change and a whole bunch of other things. It'd be a very interesting talk with Dr. Joel Wallach in a few minutes when we get him on the line. I will say this. Our first hour was another fascinating look at how the Chinese government operates. There's no other way to put it, really.
It occurred to me that, I always wondered why China was so frightened of groups like the Falun Gong, the Uyghurs, the Buddhists, the Christians, and then
Tibetans.
Tibetans, and
any religion, really.
Yeah. I realized that they're not frightened of them at all. They're just using them to, like our guest said, scare the bleep out of everybody else.
Yeah.
So
everybody's a member of some group.
Yeah, it's just business. It's just business. We have to wipe you out.
Yeah.
Don't take it personally.
Yeah. They're talking about the old Chinese saying is kill the chicken in front of a monkey, so monkey all scared.
Well,
you try that.
Kill the chicken in front of a monkey.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Huh. Kill the chicken and frighten the monkey.
Yeah.
That's one of the old proverbs in Chinese.
Yeah.
Well, we have on the KSCO Live line, I've worked with Dr. Wallach on several programs here on the radio stations for quite a while. It's my extreme pleasure to bring him on the radio station with us. Dr. Wallach, good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
How are you today?
Okay, fired up and ready to go.
All right. Listen, we have been talking about you in the first hour and your familiarity with China and what is going on with various aspects of the country. I know you're here to talk to us about how the climate may be affected by China. Tell us a little about that.
About the dam that's building the dam, and then how the building the dam actually affecting the climate change.
Yeah, we have to stop killing chickens in front of monkeys.
So, Dr. Wallach, welcome to the program. I read some reporter talking about before 1949 in China only have 23 dams, including the one in Taiwan. So since 1949, they built up to 98,000.
More than 98,000.
Yeah, I'm talking about probably 20.
Let's just round it up to 100,000 dams.
There. And another threatening thing is another reporter say the 60,000 dams have structural problems, faulty materials.
Faulty materials and structural problems.
Unbelievable.
Okay, well, I've done a little research here. I didn't know exactly what the basic nature of the program was going to be, but I did find out that prior to 1950, Hubei province was known as the province of 1,000 lakes. It was 1950. It had 1,066 lakes, and as people began to build little farm dams and that sort of stuff, and community dams to conserve water and irrigation and so forth, by 30 years later, 1980, the number of dams dropped from 1,066 down to 309. Okay, they dropped something like 800 different dams here. And of course, this has resulted in problems in the upper and the middle Yangtze Basin. There's 443 rivers that have flooded in this last incident here, this current incident. Wow. 443 rivers have flooded. There are 219 people dead. There are, let's see here, 744,000 people were displaced from their homes in 26 provinces that were flooded. And let's see, financial losses of individuals and companies, that individuals included 63.46 million people. The financial losses is 178.96 billion CNY.
That's the Chinese yuan. Now, Dr. Wallach, you had yuan. Now, Dr. Wallach, the other day I spoke to you. We had a very interesting discussion about the building the dam that can actually cause a lot of consequence on global warming and climate change. Would you tell us, tell our audience a little bit about your research?
Okay. Well, you have to appreciate that when you say global warming, they're also talking about the carbon dioxide levels in the air going up. That's all part of that picture. And they want to blame it on fossil fuels, coal, oil, natural gas, those kinds of things. And that's 1,000% incorrect. Fossil fuels are not the cause of the carbon dioxide going up and climate change, which has resulted in all kinds of economic things going on in agriculture and business and so on. What happened was, as you dam up all these rivers, you shut off the food supply to the eaters of the carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is the food of plants, and 3/5 of the world's plants are in the oceans and bays and gulfs around the world. Some, most of them are saltwater, some are freshwater. But when you cut off the food supply to these big water places and oceans and seas and gulfs and so forth, you're especially when you're cutting off the silt, when you dam up the rivers, you shut off the silt and the sediment. Now, in America alone, since 1950, I'm going to give you a figure that's going to freak you out. No, let's back up. 1930. Since 1930, when we began to build all these dams in America, it resulted per year since 1950. So let me back up again. Since 1930, I apologize. 1930, 150 million tons of silt and sediment are backed up behind all of our dams in the United States. 80,000 dams each year. 150 million tons of silt and sediment build up each year, and this is the food from the algae in the oceans. They require 17 minerals to be able to break down carbon dioxide gas into solid carbon chains for amino acids, for protein, carbohydrates, hormones, that sort of stuff, constructive material, connective tissue for stems and leaves and roots and things. And so we cut off the food supply so the plants cannot break down carbon dioxide into safe, usable components. And people have totally, and I went back and I looked at literally thousands of articles in the last 2 years, and they have completely missed that point. They've completely missed the point. And so what we have to do is find a way. Right now, each year they're taking this 150 million tons of silt and sediment, and they're just throwing it in the garbage dumps along with crash cars and house garbage and stuff like that, just throwing it in there. They're not utilizing it. They should be grinding it up and putting it into the sea. Or in most cases, it'll just go right into the sea, and we can siphon from behind these dams. We can use a siphon, doesn't require any energy. We can use augers and get the sediment from behind the dams on a daily basis and get it down into the oceans and the bays. I mean, all of the deltas in Europe, in North America, are dying because we cut off the food supply.
You know, Dr. Wallach, one of the great illustrations of what you're talking about is I saw a satellite picture not too long ago about the mouth of the river that enters into the Gulf of Mexico, the Mississippi River.
Yeah,
you're well aware of that, obviously. By the way, you already knew what I was going to say. The satellite picture looks like the entire mouth of the bay of the Gulf of Mexico is dead for about 200 miles. You know, because none of the right sediment's coming down.
It's a nitrification.
Right. We've killed. Well, don't go there. We've killed 2,000 square miles of the wetlands that had historically fed the Mississippi River Delta. We've killed those 2,000 square miles, and most of it is in Louisiana. And so everybody wants to talk about carbon dioxide going up, nitrification, and they freak out when there's a spill of some fertilizer or something like that. And there's a big bloom of algae. Oh, look at that! The algae it's clogging up the electric dams and all that kind of stuff. Well, you have to appreciate that those algae are responding to that fertilizer. And that's the problem. That's why they can't consume the carbon dioxide, because they don't have enough nutrition for their equipment to work, so to speak, to be able to make that conversion. And so what we have to do is get this 150 million tons. I mean, just think of that figure. Each year, 150 million tons, just in the United States alone. Think of all the dams in Europe and Asia and Australia. I'm getting all the
and China
information. And China. Well, it's Asia. I said Asia.
You know, Dr. Wallach, it occurs to me that, we've had all these worries about some of our dams failing because, they haven't had a lot of maintenance and things like that. But you just pointed out something I've never thought of until you pointed it out, the fact that there's a whole bunch of silt and heavy tonnage building up on the water side of the dam, which is putting more pressure on the structure of the dam. And it seems to me if we could get some of that silt out of there, it would A, help the environment, and B, help the dam.
Yeah, you get a twofer, absolutely. And so you have to appreciate, these minerals from the silt and sediment have been coming down rivers and streams for 19 billion years. 19 billion years. I'm writing information about, when the Earth was actually started, and when we actually have fossils that go back 10 billion years ago, fossils of reefs, 10 billion years ago. So this is nothing new, and so we have to appreciate that reefs have been around a long time, and if we're very, very careful and clever, we can get these reefs, especially the Great Barrier Reef. They dammed up the three rivers that fed the Great Barrier Reef for billions of years. The Great Barrier Reef water supply and minerals and silt and sediment were in these three rivers, and they dammed them up in 1947 for hydroelectric, and that was the beginning of the downfall of the Great Barrier Reef. It was in 1927. And my friends in Australia are supposed to get me all the data for every year since 1927 of each of those three rivers and how much tonnage of silt and stuff has been backed up. And again, they just throw it in the trash as dirt and sludge and mud, and they don't realize it was the food that these algae and plankton and seaweed require to be able to. They need 17 specific minerals for their biochemistry to work to break down the carbon dioxide in the air into carbon chains, which can make like 500 different things.
Well, it's the beginning of the food chain.
Well, you just put your finger on it. That's exactly right.
Dr. Wallach, did you say actually what was that?
150 million tons.
3/5 of the carbon dioxide was actually absorbed by the algae?
Okay, the algae actually eats the carbon dioxide. Algae eats the carbon dioxide. An algae is a plant. All plants eat carbon dioxide, whether it's an oak tree
and produce oxygen.
Yes. Produce
and so they break it down into oxygen and carbon chains, and it's the algae that does that. And when you start killing the algae, you start damming up the rivers for hydroelectric or irrigation or water conservation, all in good faith, and people think they're doing a good thing. They're cutting off the food supply to 3/5 of the world's plants, because 3/5 of the world's plants are marine plants, algae, seaweed, plankton, that kind of stuff. And they require all this carbon dioxide, but they do require 17 minerals. I looked at 2 PhD theses of marine biologists who were looking at what algae eat and how much carbon dioxide they need and how much they break down and so forth. And it's very clear that there's 17 minerals that are required, 17 specific minerals that are required for the biochemistry of the algae to work and break down carbon dioxide into carbon chains and oxygen.
What you say is actually these 17 minerals is acting like vitamin to human being, like
except it's to the plankton and the other stuff that lives in the ocean.
Yeah.
Right.
So I saw the one example in 2005 visiting China in the lake in the Yunnan province called Kunming Lake, and they kill all the algae. And so all the fish, everything died. Why? Because Queen Elizabeth wanted to visit in China that time. So he said that, the empress, and have the in Beijing called the Kunming Lake. So it's a copy of the real Kunming Lake. So he wanted to visit in the real one. So they said, well, we have to clean the lake. So they kill everything. So since then, you can't swim in there, and you can't, no fish, all the fish are dead, everything. So you're so right,
Doc Wallach, one of the best examples of that which you speak can be seen in Egypt with the Nile Delta and the Great Nile River and the high dam at Aswan that has prevented the great flooding of the Nile Delta.
Right.
And you can see the impact of that on the horses that they used to rent on the Giza Plateau, whereas the horse around here will last 30 years. Not so much in Egypt.
Well, unless they're, Well, again, you have to appreciate that when you throw everything else out into the garbage in exchange for one thing, you're going to have all kinds of complications and bad events. Okay? They didn't plan on cutting off the food supply. When they built the Aswan Dam, they didn't know, and in fact, they may not know now that they're cutting off the food supply to the algae in the downstream rivers and the deltas. And this is why they're having so much problems, and this is why we have so much carbon dioxide, and this is why we have so much starvation, and this is why we have so much flooding, because everything was done for power and electricity. By power, I mean power to run industry and factories and that kind of stuff and keep people warm and cook and so on. And also it created problems because when we were still using wood stoves and fireplaces and fire pits before 1882, when Thomas Edison, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Monday, September 4th, 1882, pulled the switch on the first commercial electric generating plant in New York City, before that, for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, everybody got their minerals by taking the wood ashes from their wood stoves and fireplaces and fire pits and putting them into their gardens. That was their fertilizer for their gardens, the wood ashes. They put them into their food. And this went on for thousands and thousands of years. But when we went to electricity, there was no more wood ashes, and people started feeling kind of funky after a couple of years. They say, and there was 40 new diseases nobody had ever seen, and doctors are blaming it on genetics because that was the new darling of science, was genetics at that time. And people go to their doctor and say, shouldn't I be taking some vitamins and minerals? I'm really feeling funky. Nah, just eat well, you get everything you need. Doctors would tell these people, and then they would die, and they'd have heart attacks. They'd be in the hospital on 30 different prescriptions, and the surgery was a success, but the patient would die, all because they weren't getting vitamins and minerals.
Dr. Wallach, it occurs to me that two things ought to happen here pretty quick. I don't want to put you on the spot, but you should actually write a paper or a book about this and send it to somebody who could actually consider doing something about it worldwide. Yeah. Because your idea is, I had not thought about it directly, but it seems to me that your idea makes a great deal of sense.
Yeah.
About trying to.
This book.
What's that?
We already have the book. It's called Hell's Kitchen. There's a CD that goes along with it, and it goes into the history of when Thomas Edison pulled the switch. It goes back to thousands of years before that, how everything was working, and everything was working. And then civilization came along, and people began to build dams for water conservation and irrigation and that kind of stuff. And then we had, in 1918 and 1919, we had the Spanish flu, which was the first big pandemic in America.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And we lost 657,000 people died. Right now we have 656,000 people dead. And so we're getting pretty close to that Spanish flu. And India had the worst. They had 20 million people die in 6 months during the Spanish flu.
Wow.
Because at that time, everybody was just very primitive. In 1918, 1919, doctors didn't know what to do and so forth. It was a mess. And they did have some hydroelectric back in those days. And then we had H1N1 come along. Then we had the Spanish flu. Then we had HIV. Then we had polio. All these pandemics are caused because your immune system is dead, because by damming up the rivers since 1882 to make electricity, that's when our problem started. And all these pandemics, one after the other, keep coming. And guess what? Today, we finally have the first case of the Lambda variation, the Lambda COVID-19. It's now C37. The Lambda variant. The COVID-19 Delta variant is in all 50 states, and 83% of the new cases are the Delta variant. But now we got the complication of the Lambda variant. There's 30 countries involved, and now there's 31 because we just got our first case of the Lambda variant, C37. And so you can figure within 6 months to 2 years, there's going to be another pandemic that'll make this one look like child's play. It's going to be worse by 100 times.
I talk about the Dan. I'm visiting China, and they have one little river. It's about 100 miles long, and they built more than 120 dam. So the reason is, they talk about, we need the power, we need the electric power, whatever, but that's not the truth. The truth is the different level of government, if they got a project to build a dam, so they got the corruption money, because that project lots of company wanted, so they had to, once they wanted to get the job, so they had to corrupt the officer. It's just so easy to get lots of money. So they call you build a bridge, is you got a gold. You build a road, you got a silver. If you build a dam, you got a diamond. So that's why they just keep on building. They don't care.
Okay, here's how we get around that. the quickest way to get around that is to get people off all the bad foods that are damaging their intestines, the gluten, wheat, brown rhinos, eat like an Asian, eat rice and sweet potatoes and beans and squash. So the gluten heals, the gluten damage the intestines heals in weeks, so we can absorb the nutrition, so our immune systems will be good. But then they have to supplement with 215 nutrients, which include the 90. 90, of course, is the core, but we have what we call the big hammer in our toolbox called the Healthy Brain and Heart Pack, which has 215 nutrients in it. I've been taking these 90-plus nutrients for 47 years. I've been gluten-free for, let me back up, for 74 years, for 74 years. And I've been eating gluten-free for 74 years. I've been taking the 90 essential nutrients for 74 years. And I'm 82 years old, and I don't have any arthritis or high blood pressure or diabetes. I don't have any back problems. I don't have any lupus. I don't have any celiac disease. I don't have any kidney failure. I'm not on dialysis. And I'm 82 years old. Okay? And so it's one of these things where we can quickly, within weeks, we can solve all these problems. If we get people off all the bad foods, get them on the good foods, eat like Asians, supplement with the 90 essential nutrients, better yet, the 215 nutrients, and all of these problems will go away. But we still, to save the earth, we still need to figure out a way to siphon or pump all these minerals from behind the dam downstream, so that the algae will live and do their job and create more oxygen and eat more carbon dioxide. We need to do all of that.
So we need to give the Earth a healthy start pack, basically.
That's right.
You got it. Very well said.
Yeah, Doc Wallach, I'd like to ask about the impact of the lack of total nutrition on intellect. And because I'm thinking of the Nile Delta and the lack of the flood, you can still grow legumes pretty efficiently on the Nile Delta, but this all of the annual replenishment is gone.
Yeah.
And so the people who live on the food that was grown on the Nile Delta are bound to be lacking in a lot of essential nutrients. Now,
that's correct.
And so I'm wondering what impact the lack of those nutrients has on our intellectual abilities and emotional abilities to cope as well.
Well, it does. Of course, how many nutrients does your brain need? Your brain needs over 200 nutrients. How long do you need these 200 nutrients? Well, as long as you live. How long do you need oxygen? As long as you live. How long do you need water? As long as you live. And so when you have places where people aren't very intellectually together, invariably, nutritional minerals, for instance, do not occur in a uniform blanket around the crust of the earth. They occur in veins like gold and silver. And there's places on earth where people, their average lifespan is 120. The longest lived ones live to be about 260. This is well documented in the Hunza Valley and the Giltar Glacier between Pakistan and China. There was a great book and a movie written about that, Lost Horizon, by James Hilton, who is a very vicious New York Times and London Times reporter, investigative reporter. And he followed this Dr. Lee Chin Yun, who was supposed to be 265 years old and selling his herbs so he could live a long time. And he followed this guy for a year, and he wrote a story for the New York Times and London Times, and he wrote the book Lost Horizon in 1929, 1933. The movie came out. And that was the sort of beginning where people saw that there was things that you could do to add many healthy years to your life. There was things you could do to, get all A's in your tests and things like that, as opposed to, for instance, if your mechanic were to say to you, don't waste your money by putting oil in your car, you're just wasting your money. Oh, listen, I've got the best car in the world, and I'm going to put the best oil in. You're wasting your money. Don't put oil in your car. Just put dirt from Texas and Oklahoma in there. There's bound to be some oil in it because that dirt from Texas and Oklahoma only costs you 10 cents a quart. An idiot wouldn't do that to their car. But when a doctor says, just eat well and get everything you need, people beat their chest and say, my doctor says, just as though the doctor was Jesus Christ. My doctor says I can get everything I need just by eating well, so I'm going to go home and eat well and kill myself.
Dr. Wallach, it seems like you mentioned that there's a relation between the growth of algae over the sea and the growing of reefs at the delta areas. So is the reef growth also stopped because of the dams stopped the sill floating down to the sea?
Correct.
Now, do you think there's any relation also between the death of the reefs and the growing percentage of emission?
No.
So it's purely just the algae part.
You actually cut off the food supply to the algae that eats the carbon dioxide. Mm-hmm. Okay, now let me give you an example. Hawaii has dozens of little islands around it, and about a third of those islands have hydroelectric dams, and those little islands are dying. The ones that don't have hydroelectric, those little reefs are flourishing. They're all part of Hawaii. And so it's very, very easy to see. When you cut off the food supply to the algae, the reefs die. When you cut off the food supply to the delta die. When you cut off the food supply to the fields don't grow very well. And then they started saying, "Oh, we have to, do some water, or maybe we're going to have to build a factory here because we're not, the land is dead." Well, the land was dead because they cut off the food supply to the land by damming up the rivers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it makes perfect sense. It's funny. I want to get back to something you said about you were talking about farmers, dumping the wood ashes from their fireplaces, their cooking areas back into the places where they grow the food. I have an apple ranch, as you know, Dr. Wallach, and how we heat the house, we do not have central heat in my old farmhouse, so we periodically take the ashes from the fireplace and take them out to the orchard and you spread them around the trees. I have several piles out there right now waiting to be spread. And, I have to say, this is the best fruit year we've ever had. I actually had one of my venerable old fruit trees crack a limb last night, and I had to go out and do some surgery on my tree because it bared so much fruit it hurt itself. So I know what you're talking about. The trouble is, I think people don't understand that the same principle works on a global scale and on a less than agricultural scale with people. It's all the same principle. It's just in a different form.
Microscopic?
Yeah.
To macroscopic.
Yeah, exactly.
And biochemistry to biochemistry. And again, the algae requires these nutrients to function. We require these nutrients to function. Horses need these nutrients to function. Apple trees require these nutrients to function. We have pomegranate trees, and we get about 200 pomegranates per tree. And, we just use our Bloomin' Minerals from Longevity, which have these 75 minerals in them. And we use our Bloomin' Minerals around our pomegranate trees, our orange trees, our banana trees, and everybody else around us. They can't get anything to grow.
Yeah, it's amazing the difference, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, also basically from what I'm hearing from you, Dr. Wallach, the United Nations, all these sustainable economic development plan, they're just totally going in the wrong direction, trying to stop the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere.
Yes, there is. Yes, in other words, it's like saying, look, you have streptococcus in your throat. We're going to kill that by hitting your feet with a hammer.
So what about So basically, all these Green New Deal or whatever, if they actually collecting billions or maybe even more money, that's going to just doing nothing. Is that right?
Well, unless they do something to get the silt and the sediment from behind these dams into the rivers, into the deltas, into the bays, into the gulfs, into the oceans, then nothing good is going to happen. It's all going to be bad because you cannot stop the carbon dioxide production from living things. Carbon dioxide production has been around since the beginning of time. But it won't go away. It just accumulates in a big cloud above the earth unless something eats it. And this is what the job of the plants are. Trees and trees and in the forest, but they only make up two fifths of the plant of the Earth's plants. 3/5 of the Earth's plants is in the water, algae, plankton. We're talking about every kind of green thing you can think of in the ocean, but it requires these nutrients, these 17 minerals, for their biochemistry to work. We require things to work. You can have kidneys, but if you're not giving your kidneys what it needs, you're not going to have any urine. And so you'll have to have dialysis.
Cycle of the
of course,
life.
doctors like that. Yes, right.
Yeah. Dr. Wallach is just talking about a giant eco-cycle that we have interrupted. We have
just like by putting up that Aswan Dam.
Yeah.
We have stopped the annual flooding of the Nile Delta.
Or the Hoover Dam. Or
So, Doc,
a bunch of dams.
What's going to happen to the people of Cairo?
Well, they're all getting sick and dying early, but the doctors are happy.
Now,
Cycle of life. That's also.
Now, did you ever write to any Congress representative or our?
Yes, many times, and of course we've sued the federal government in the federal courts 12 times and won. The last time was April 16, 2013. We won in federal court to force baby formulas, Enfamil and Similac, to put minerals into the baby formulas, and as a result. Now, sit down. As a result, I'm the guy who got rid of cystic fibrosis, supposed to be a genetic disease of babies. I'm the guy who got rid of muscular dystrophy, supposed to be a genetic disease of babies. They fired Jerry Lewis when he brought them a dozen of our... I sent a U.S. Marine SEAL, Navy SEAL, with these charts to give to Jerry Lewis. He called the doctors. They all said, we don't know why, but their muscular dystrophy is gone. And he took them to the Muscular Dystrophy Association. They fired Jerry Lewis, and the telethon ended in 2011 because they fired Jerry Lewis, and you haven't heard anything about sudden death syndrome because I eliminated sudden death syndrome, I eliminated muscular dystrophy, and I eliminated cystic fibrosis. Now, here's the beautiful thing about this. Now, one medical school called me and said, will you give a lecture on this subject to our OBGYNs and our pediatricians? Not one medical school, not one naturopathic school has called me. Not one Naturopathic Medical Association or MD Medical Association has called me to come speak to them how I got rid of those 3 diseases. But it's in federal court that I did it because they forced these. See, the cystic fibrosis and muscular dystrophy was just a simple nutritional deficiency disease. Sudden death syndrome, doctors said the mothers are laying on the babies. Well, 98% of the babies, when I went and looked at the actual records, 98% of those babies were supposed to die of sudden death syndrome were in their cribs when they died. So I made them change the name to crib death. I'm the one that made change the name to crib death because they're in the crib. They weren't dying underneath their mothers. And then when I actually did autopsies on them myself, they were dying of hypertrophic cardiomyopathy heart disease. So that's where Dr. Milan and I, we went to Heilongjiang, China, and Qishan University in Heilongjiang Province. And we did 1,700 autopsies on kids under the age of 10 in China. What American gets to go to China and do 1,700 autopsies on Chinese kids? Well, Dr. Milan was a microsurgeon from there. She taught and did research at Harvard, and so she had this connection between America and China. And so that's published in 3 languages, including Mandarin and Cantonese. The English version is in the Biology of Trace Element Research, and I received the Klaus Schwarz Award for that, which is kind of like the Nobel Prize amongst the natural industry, okay? But when it comes to it, now, if I was a medical doctor from Harvard Medical School and got rid of those 3 diseases, I'd have got the Nobel Prize 3 times. But they didn't even give me a telephone call and say thank you.
If you already have so many successful cases built up to establish your findings, did you ever heard back from the Congress to what you suggest to them?
No, because doctors give them lots of money to vote the way they want them to vote.
Doc Wallach, would you be so kind as to comment on the relationship between Big Pharma and the vaccine and the COVID phenomenon? How do you see all of this shaking out?
Okay, well, the vaccines, of course, are a good thing. They go way back to 1795 when Edward Jenner made the first vaccination. It was against smallpox, and it was a very good thing. Then about 90 years later, 1885, a guy by the name of Louis Pasteur, there was a big outbreak of rabies in Russia and France, and so he came up with a vaccine for rabies. And then in 1936, there was a big outbreak of the flu, and they came up with vaccinations here in the United States for that flu. And so vaccinations are a good thing. But you have to appreciate pharmaceutical companies manufacture them, and when they manufacture them sort of at the last minute, the flu is here, people are dying by the thousands, we're going to ask a little bit more money here because, people want it now, so we have to work harder in 24 hours, so and so we need to be on top of these things, but vaccinations are good. I had the Moderna vaccination. I had 2 of them. I had the first one, then 30 days later I had another one because I had to fly around to give my lectures and do my autopsies and things like that. And they won't let you on the airplane without proof of vaccination. So I had to get the vaccinations. I didn't have any local reaction. I'm 82 years old. I've been taking the 90 essential nutrients for 74 years, been gluten-free for 74 years, been supplementing for 74 years. And so I didn't have any negative reaction, because everything is working like it's supposed to. People have to appreciate that vaccinations don't kill viruses, bacteria, fungus, and yeast. They just alert your body to the bad DNA and RNA. And your body has to do the rest. So you have to be able to absorb nutrition to give to your immune system. Well, that means you can't be eating gluten because your intestines are dead when you eat gluten. That's why 3-year-olds and 5-year-olds, when they get the COVID, they get common cold-like symptoms for 3 or 4 or 5 days, and then they have all the antibodies against the COVID-19, and they're good to go for the rest of their life. But if you've been on gluten for, say, 12, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years, your intestines are dead, and you can't absorb nutrition even if you're supplementing. And so your bone marrow cannot make white blood cells, cannot make red blood cells, platelets, and antibodies, and you cannot respond to the vaccination. That's why there's so many people who got 2 vaccinations. They are dying of COVID because they cannot respond properly to the vaccination because they're eating gluten and not supplementing. It's not the vaccination's fault. It's the doctor's fault by telling people, don't waste your money on vitamins and minerals, just eat well, you get everything you need. Any doctor who says that should be put in jail for being a serial killer, meaning weak.
How do you think this nutrient deficiency syndrome of which you speak will affect a large country like China that has dammed up all of its rivers?
Well, the effect is going to be downstream time-wise. You have to appreciate that the reason why the Chinese have done so well over the years is because they eat rice and sweet potatoes and beans and squash and that kind of stuff. There's no gluten in them.
And used to recycle we used to recycle everything too.
Yeah, and they would take the wood ashes and coal ashes and put them in their gardens for fertilizer, right? Well, now they have all this modern stuff, and they're starting to grow more wheat. In certain provinces, they grow a lot of wheat. And watch, those provinces will have all the diseases of the Western world that they never had before, because their intestines will be dead, their villi will be dead, and they're not supplementing anymore because they're not using wood for fuel, not putting wood ashes in their gardens, not putting wood ashes in their food. So you're going to see segments of China, they're going to be really, really devastated by this change in practice of how they farm, how they create energy, how they heat, how they cook, and so on.
And what about the U.S.?
We're already there.
We're already in a downward spiral. And so that's why you have to appreciate that most of the people in longevity, our company, do not have problems with gluten because they know not to eat gluten. Most of them don't have a problem with their vaccines because they're taking the 90 essential nutrients, and so they can respond to the vaccines.
So what you're saying is that our human bodies are just like those little
microbes
that we're starving to death by building dams.
That's correct. Our bodies are just kind of a bigger version of the algae and the plankton and the...
and the Earth is a bigger version of us.
Yeah.
That's correct. Yeah, we are the Earth. The Earth is us, we are the Earth. Very good.
Wow, what a fascinating conversation, Dr. Wallach. We appreciate your time today. It's just...
But wait a minute. Where do we go from here?
Well, that's what I was just about to ask him. How do we solve this? Because, look, it's fine for you to tell us and give our audience here in Santa Cruz and the Tri-County area and wherever they're listening on the Internet, the basic idea of how to fix it. But how do we get the word to the...
NBC News.
Yeah, NBC News and the United Nations and places like that.
Okay, well, listen up. We only have a few moments here, I'm assuming, so let's listen up. I want you to go to www.drjwallach.com, www.drjwallach.com. I have 15 books there. I have 100 CDs. I have 50 DVDs. We have the book and the CD, Hell's Kitchen, which goes into the history of all this and tells you what to do about it. It's the book and the CD, Hell's Kitchen. We have the book and the CD, Immortality, goes into all the things that people who live a long time avoid and all the things that they do positively to live longer than anybody else. And then we have the book Epigenetics. I'm considered one of the two fathers of the science of epigenetics, called Epigenetics, the Death of the Genetic Theory of Disease Transmission. Epigenetics has replaced genetics. Genetics was a false theory. There are no genetically transmitted diseases. There are no genetically transmitted birth defects. That's why my thesis, which was a $25 million study based on my first research projects, I looked at a mass die-off in America and figured out that it was due to pollution and figured out what pollution. We got rid of the pollution and solved the problem. But 500 sheep died in one night. They were perfectly healthy, ready to go to market the next day, and they all died in one night. And they were all getting nitrate poisoning in their drinking water. I figured it all out. I'm only 21 years old. Got it published. And I got a $25 million grant with Marlon Perkins from the old Mutual Omaha Kingdom show. And Barry Commoner, who's the head of the Department of Biology at Washington University in St. Louis. The three of us got this grant for $25 million, and they did 20,000 autopsies and about 10 million chemistries and slides and all that kind of stuff, and it showed there were no genetically transmitted diseases or genetically transmitted birth defects, and that's what my thesis is in the Smithsonian Institute as National Treasure. So it's going to take all of us getting this information out there, and so the books are available, the CDs are available, the tools are available, we have the supplements available. We had to save the people first, because if all the people died, the Earth is dead.
That's a good point, actually. That's a very good point.
So we have to save human beings first, and we can save the Earth along the way, but we have to get people on the 90 essential nutrients, better yet the 215, get them off all the bad foods so they can absorb, and we have to live like Asians, live on rice and sweet potatoes and beans and squash, and get rid of all the bad stuff, and then we need to have some. I've done what I can do. I paid for all those lawsuits in federal court out of my own pocket. It's cost me millions and millions and millions of dollars over the years, and so I'm doing what I can do. We have all these books and CDs, getting all this information out there, but that's why I knew we had to build an army. That I couldn't do it by myself, seeing 25 patients a day. And when I graduated school, I became a physician in 1982. Right away, I realized that I had to have some method to get the information out there by the masses, and so this is how we created this home-based business thing with Youngevity, and now we're in 60 countries. We're in 60 countries. We're almost at $200 million a year in sales. Little bitty company for vitamins and minerals. But we need to have every person on earth understand what I'm saying. And so, again, I have all these wins in the federal court, 12 wins in federal court. Even these judges could not go against 1,700 autopsies on kids. They couldn't go against 20,000 autopsies. They couldn't go against 10 million chemistries. They had to rule in my favor. And so we were able to get these nutrients here, there, and yon and do things. But it's not enough. We need to have everybody talking about this 24/7. And when I, got hooked up with Michael Zwirling and Tom Love and got on the 2 radio stations, and then when I do George Norrie, in fact, this coming Tuesday, the next Tuesday, I'll be doing George Norrie. He has 12 million people listening for my 2 hours I'm with him. But we need more. That's not enough. We need to save the earth. We need to get all of this into every place, and so everybody needs to be working on this 24/7.
Dr. Wallach, will remind folks that your program airs at 12:06 on KOMY here in this local market and in other markets around the country, and you can also hear it on the internet. And we very much appreciate your time. We're right at the end of the hour here. I need to go to my commercial break, but we want to thank you for joining us and spending an hour of your time with us today. We greatly appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much. Can't appreciate enough your hospitality and getting all these folks on here. These are powerful people who you joined with us here today, and so we expect that good things are going to happen. Let's save humanity. Let's save the earth. And, of course, I already started by saving the white rhino. That's my first book I ever wrote, was Rhino Express.
Dr. Wallach, you're the best. Thanks for joining us. We appreciate it.
Okay. God bless. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Satisfy your hunger with a fresh, prepared, twice-daily grab-and-go sushi you'll find waiting for you at Sushi Market Sprouts, 2 blocks from the beach at 300 7th Avenue in Santa Cruz. Fresh, delicious, and oh so good.
Hello, I'm Junko, and I look forward to serving you at the Sushi Market Sprouts.
At Batteries Plus, we do more than fix phones and tablets. We help our neighbors power their lives. Visit Batteries Plus in-store, curbside, and online to save $10 on Duracell Ultra car batteries. For offer details and limitations, visit batteriesplus.com.
Coast Paper and Supply has been family-owned and operated since 1948. They have a wide array of products available, including brand name and eco-friendly cleaning supplies, paper goods, and compostable plates, cups, and cutlery. Whether your needs are for business or home, Coast Paper and Supply's friendly and reliable staff have what you're looking for. You can find them at 151 Josephine on River Street in Santa Cruz, Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 4:30, or call at 831-423-3350. Coast Paper and Supply is a proud member of Think Local First.
Primo Roofing Company is giving away a free roof to a deserving homeowner. Do you know a friend, neighbor, or family member in desperate need of a new roof? This year, in addition to the free roof, we're proud to provide exterior painting, a solar system, gutters, skylights, and much more. Log on to PrimoRoofing.com. That's PrimoRoofing.com, and fill out the free roof application. We're looking forward to seeing our community come together to help one of our own in need. Free roof giveaway brought to you by Primo Roofing Company and their local partners.
Listeners from coast to coast are discovering the Charles Friedman program, weekdays from 9 till noon. Here's an example from a long-haul trucker.
Charlie, I really appreciate several radio stations, but there is no radio station in this country that I have found that is even close to what KSCO is. It's a gem. The both sides and the non-syndicated programming, and you yourself a local talking to local people, and the relationship that the callers have with the radio station, and the way you handle your callers. You're a genius, Charlie. I respect you so much for your articulation and the way you can talk to your callers and explain the truth without being mean. You're an expert. I listen to you on the app. I love your show, Charlie. You do an excellent service for the people who listen to you.
Don't miss the Charles Friedman program, weekdays 9 till noon on KSCO.
Hi, this is Dr. Duncan McCollum inviting you to join me 1 o'clock Saturday for McCollum Wellness Radio. I'll be discussing some of the latest trends in building your immune system. It used to be survival of the fittest. Now it's survival of the healthiest with the strongest immune system. Tune in so I can walk you through some of the best things that you can do to boost your immune system, reduce brain fog, increase your energy, and have an amazing life. Tune in this Saturday, 1 o'clock on KSCO for McCollum Wellness Radio.
Wow, it's hard to believe our program went by that fast. I want to thank Nan Su and Amy Howe, our regular guests, and, of course, Michael Olson for joining us for some great questions on both of our guests today. I want to thank Dr. Joel Wallach for joining us for an entire hour. And I also want to thank our first hour guest, who has been with us before, Levi Browde. Some fantastic information today. We hope you enjoyed our program. Join us next Thursday on China Über Alice. This is KSCO Santa Cruz. Stay tuned for Flight 1080. It's coming up.